The Los Angeles wildfire had transformed the once vibrant cityscape into a hellish inferno. Smoke choked the air, and the sky glowed an unnatural orange. Keanu Reeves maneuvered his black motorcycle through the chaos, his leather jacket singed at the edges. He wasn't a firefighter or a rescue worker, but the city was his home, and he couldn't sit idly by while it burned. As he turned onto a deserted street lined with charred trees and abandoned cars, a faint sound broke through the roar of the flames. A whimper. Keanu slowed the bike, pulling off his helmet to listen more closely. The sound came again, weak and desperate. He followed it, weaving through the debris until he spotted the source. A tiny dog, white, covered in soot and trembling, was trapped between a fallen tree and the growing flames. Its eyes, wide with terror, locked onto his. Keanu's heart clenched. He didn't hesitate. "Hold on, little guy," he murmured, kicking down the bike's stand. The flames were closing in fast, licking at the dry brush around the tree. Keanu sprinted toward the dog, his boots crunching against the ash-covered ground. The heat was suffocating, and the air reeked of burning wood and chemicals, but his focus never wavered. As he reached the dog, the tree groaned ominously, threatening to collapse further. Keanu crouched, extending a hand. "Come on, buddy. I've got you." The dog hesitated, its small body trembling. Keanu dropped to his knees, ignoring the searing heat radiating from the ground. "It's okay," he said softly, his voice steady and calm. "I won't hurt you. I promise." Finally, the dog limped toward him, its paw injured and its fur singed. Keanu scooped it up, cradling it against his chest as he turned to run back to the bike. But before he could reach safety, the tree shifted again, sending a shower of sparks into the air. The tree cracked, splitting down the middle as flames consumed its base. Keanu bolted, clutching the trembling dog tightly against his chest. Behind him, the massive trunk collapsed with a deafening crash, sending a wave of heat and embers surging forward. "Hang on, buddy," Keanu murmured, his voice calm but his pulse racing. His boots pounded against the scorched ground as he darted through the thick smoke, every breath burning his lungs. The fire was closing in, devouring everything in its path with terrifying speed. The dog whimpered, burying its soot-streaked face into his jacket. Keanu tightened his grip, shielding the tiny creature from the searing heat. He spotted his motorcycle up ahead, its black paint gleaming faintly through the haze. With one final sprint, he reached the bike. He placed the dog gently in the small storage compartment on the back, leaving it open so the animal could breathe. "Stay here," he said, his voice firm but reassuring. "We're getting out of this." Keanu swung his leg over the bike and revved the engine. The roar of the motor seemed to challenge the encroaching inferno. Flames licked at the edges of the road, but he didn't hesitate, weaving through the debris with precision born from years of stunt training. The dog let out a small yelp as the bike jolted over a cracked section of asphalt. "You're okay," Keanu called over his shoulder, glancing back to make sure the dog was still secure. Its frightened eyes met his, and in that brief moment, something inside him solidified. He wasn't just escaping for himself, he was fighting for this little life in his care. As the fire raged on both sides of the road, Keanu spotted a clearing up ahead, a potential safe zone. But a fallen power line blocked the path, sparking dangerously in the ash-laden air. Keanu gritted his teeth, his mind racing. There was no time to find another way. "Hold tight," he muttered, revving the engine once more. With a burst of speed, he leaned forward, guiding the bike straight toward the obstacle. The fallen power line crackled with sparks, a live threat stretched across the road like a snake waiting to strike. Keanu's jaw tightened as he calculated the distance. He had done stunts like this in movies, but this wasn't a set. There were no safety nets, no do-overs. Behind him, the dog let out a sharp bark, its small voice cutting through the roar of the flames. Keanu glanced back briefly, the animal's fear fueling his resolve. "We're not stopping now," he said, more to himself than the dog. With a deep breath, he twisted the throttle, sending the motorcycle roaring forward. The bike's tires skidded slightly on the loose ash, but Keanu maintained control, his eyes locked on the power line. "Here we go," he murmured, leaning forward as the bike gained speed. The moment came in a blur. Keanu yanked the handlebars up, propelling the bike into the air. For a brief second, it felt as though time slowed. The world reduced to the crackling flames, the rising smoke, and the weight of the tiny life depending on him. The bike soared over the power line, sparks erupting beneath them as the wheels cleared the danger by mere inches. Keanu landed hard on the other side, the impact jolting through his body. He steadied the bike, skidding slightly before regaining control. Behind him, the power line hissed, sending a burst of sparks into the air. But they were clear, alive. Keanu let out a shaky breath, relief washing over him. He glanced back at the dog, who was still trembling but otherwise unharmed. "Told you we'd make it," he said, his lips curving into a small, reassuring smile. But the relief was short-lived. As they sped toward the clearing, Keanu noticed something that made his stomach drop. The fire wasn't contained. It was spreading fast, driven by sudden gusts of wind, and the safe zone he had hoped for was now surrounded by walls of flame. He slowed the bike, scanning the area desperately. His eyes landed on a narrow, unmarked dirt path leading into the hills. It was risky, likely treacherous, but it was their only chance. "Hang in there, little one," Keanu said, turning the bike toward the path. "We're not done yet." The dirt path was uneven and riddled with debris, winding upward into the hills. Keanu tightened his grip on the handlebars, the bike bouncing over the rough terrain. The fire roared behind them, relentless in its pursuit, and the air was thick with smoke, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The dog whimpered from its spot in the storage compartment, its tiny body jostling with every bump. "I know, buddy," Keanu called back, his voice strained but steady. "Just hold on a little longer." As the path climbed higher, the flames seemed to grow closer, the intense heat prickling the back of his neck. Keanu's mind raced, searching for a way out. He'd been in high-pressure situations before, but this felt different. This wasn't a scene with scripted danger or choreographed explosions. This was raw, uncontrollable chaos. Suddenly, the dirt path narrowed, a jagged cliff dropping off to one side. On the other, a wall of rock loomed, its surface scorched black by the encroaching fire. Keanu slowed the bike, his eyes darting between the cliff and the flames. "Of course," he muttered under his breath. "Why would it be easy?" The dog barked, a sharp, panicked sound that broke through his thoughts. Keanu glanced back, his heart aching at the fear in the little creature's eyes. "We're going to make it," he said more firmly this time, as though willing the words into reality. The fire crackled louder, and a gust of wind sent a shower of embers raining down onto the path. Keanu swerved to avoid a burning branch that had fallen in front of them, the tires skidding dangerously close to the edge of the cliff. As he regained control, he spotted something up ahead, a narrow opening in the rock wall. It was almost hidden by smoke, but it looked like it could lead to safety. The problem? A fallen tree blocked most of the entrance, leaving only a small gap. Keanu's mind raced. The gap was barely wide enough for the bike to squeeze through, and if he miscalculated, they'd crash into the rock face, or worse, fall off the cliff. He slowed the bike, taking a deep breath. "This is it, buddy," he said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through him. "One last move, and we're out of here." The dog whimpered softly, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. Keanu revved the engine, lining up the bike with the narrow gap. The flames were closing in fast, the heat almost unbearable. With a sharp twist of the throttle, he surged forward, aiming for the opening. The motorcycle hurtled toward the narrow gap, the roar of the engine blending with the crackle of the flames. Keanu leaned forward, every muscle in his body focused on the path ahead. The heat was blistering, the air so thick with smoke that it felt like breathing through a straw. The dog let out a sharp bark, its tiny body pressed tightly into the storage compartment as the bike raced toward the obstacle. The gap loomed closer, the fallen tree a jagged barrier between them and freedom. "Come on," Keanu muttered under his breath, his grip on the handlebars tightening. At the last possible moment, he shifted his weight and jerked the handlebars to the left, angling the bike toward the small opening. The tires skimmed the edge of the fallen tree, the bike scraping against the rock wall with a harsh metallic screech. For a terrifying second, Keanu thought they wouldn't make it. But then, with a burst of momentum, the bike shot through the gap, landing on the other side of the rock wall just as the flames engulfed the path behind them. They had made it. Keanu brought the bike to a stop, his chest heaving as he sucked in lungfuls of relatively clear air. The dog poked its soot-streaked head out of the compartment, looking up at him with wide, grateful eyes. Keanu chuckled softly, reaching down to stroke its trembling back. "We're okay," he said, his voice low but steady. "You're safe now." The rocky clearing they had emerged into was untouched by the fire, a small oasis of calm in the chaos. Keanu climbed off the bike, cradling the dog in his arms as he walked toward a cluster of boulders. He sat down, letting the adrenaline ebb away as he held the tiny creature close. The dog nuzzled into his chest, its trust in him palpable, despite everything it had been through. Keanu felt a lump form in his throat as he looked down at the fragile life he had just saved. "You're tougher than you look," he said with a small smile, his fingers gently brushing the soot from its fur. "I think we're going to be okay." Above them, the sky began to lighten as dawn broke through the lingering smoke. The wildfire still raged in the distance, but for now, in this moment, they were safe. Keanu stood, the dog still in his arms, and looked toward the horizon. There was a long road ahead for both the city and its people, but he felt a renewed sense of hope. Sometimes, it wasn't about saving the world all at once. Sometimes, it was about saving one small, precious life, and letting that be the spark that ignited something greater.